Welcome to the Voices That Propel Us, stories of justice, action, and community, a space where justice meets action and community voices rise. Each episode, we bring you stories from the front lines, changemakers, disruptors, and everyday heroes who are building a more just, equitable, and liberated world. This is more than a podcast. It's a call to listen, learn, and move together. You were just listening to music from the incredibly talented Stephen Kong. You can find him on Spotify and Bandcamp. Today we have with us Thomas R. Wilson. Thomas is a professional educator, writer, consultant, business owner, and purpose-driven event specialist. His work is centered around an empathic and person-first mindset that works to access and uplift community voices. It is inspired by his own lived experiences and his desire to enact mindful change. His work has been highlighted internationally, and he has partnered with over 55 businesses in the United States. Overall, Thomas's work continues to be a bright spot celebrated by the community. Well, hello. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. As I was telling you earlier, I think you do incredible work, amazing things for the community and people and bringing people together. But how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. How are you doing?
Doing well. Yeah, it's pretty hot out here in Southern California, but kind of hanging in there. I don't know how it is for you, but yeah, we've been in like almost triple digits these past couple weeks. So
It hasn't been that bad, but
okay.
we got close to 90, which is pretty unusual
Yeah.
for Colorado this time of year.
Right. Okay, no, I'd love to just get started. So can you take us back to the moment or moments that first made you realize that storytelling and creative advocacy could be a tool for justice and for liberation?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I'll be honest,
Uh-huh.
that started with me when I was very young.
Oh, okay.
I always like to tell people that my story starts with storytelling. Uh,
Okay.
and the reason I do that is because my earliest memories with my parents are of them reading to me when I was very young, long before I could read. But at the same time,
Hmm.
I also I was like so many neurospicy individuals or those of us with lived experience with a mental health diagnosis.
Right.
I was seen as a prodigy when I was very young. I
Wow.
was told I had the IQ of a 40-year-old before I was 8 years old. And then I experienced a very large shift in life.
Hmm.
And that interpretation of me shifted radically in the school system. So once I really started demonstrating my own neurospiciness
Okay.
and my own bipolar disorder, among other things, my teachers radically shifted their perception of me. And so growing up in that and growing up in a lot of programs and a lot of, and you probably noticed with me, I don't keep eye contact very long. Part of that is because that's very hard for me to do. As for many of us, it's just actually part of my advocacy. I like to talk about those things. But going back to when I was a kid, it was very much, going from that prodigy mindset, people praising me, my teachers loving me, wanting me in the class more, to becoming the problem student or being deemed too difficult to work with in programs. I really identified a very significant shame that was occurring. And I'm not here to say that it was easy, right? Like I was a very challenging student. I was someone who was also not really taught how to communicate my frustrations or my worries or my pains, especially within the school system. And my love of school very quickly became a place that was not safe. But that's where my connection, the stories really started, as I always found my peace, my happiness in stories. That those are my people, those are my confidants, those are my best friends. And I learned at a really young age that how flawed a lot of systems are, partly because a lot of what my teachers spent time doing was yelling at me and telling me that
Yeah.
I was going to end up in jail or that I was a monster, all kinds of things that no kid should ever hear, especially at a very young formative age. And that was my experience for a really long time. But in that time, one of the things a lot of people told me was I was distinctly creative.
Mm,
I had a huge heart, and I was someone who really had a talent for writing. And so that was a lot of my experience. But I also learned in that those comments and those judgments and those shamings,
mm,
I really developed a strong hatred for myself.
yeah.
And one of the things that I learned was I was not the only one. Many of the people in the programs like me, they were going through the same struggles. Well, not the same, but similar struggles, and they were being told similar things. And so, as I got older, I graduated high school, something people told me I never would do.
Okay.
I went to college, something else people told me I never would do. And then not long after that, when I started taking my career seriously, started working in healthcare and day programs and community care and home care. And I had this talent for helping people find their voice, find their self advocacy. And I was a big believer that entire time that pop culture was a great unifier,
Mm,
and partly because of stories. And then in 2021, I was going through another really hard time. I always tell people when I do these talks that day to day self care is so key, and
mm,
actually putting in the work to be our best selves, especially with those of us who have depression, anxiety, many different diagnoses. We have to put in the work. Otherwise, we start to slip. And it is realistically a day to day process. And so in 2021, I had a hard reset, and I looked at myself and I was, crying on the couch one day, and I was like, what am I going to do to get myself out of this? And the only thing that really got me off that couch and excited for the first time in a while was opening my business and
mm,
becoming a storyteller. And in that work, I knew one of the first things I wanted to do was take stories and use them
mm,
to what the way that they help me. And so I opened my business. A lot of people were nervous in that time, understandably so.
mm,
But I was fully operational in mid 2022, had my first real client that fall,
mm,
and it's been almost 5 years now.
mm,
Well, 5 since I've opened it. About 4 of operations, and it's been this beautiful joyride. I have worked with so many people who are seeking the exact same kind of empathetic, strength-based mindset that I craved.
mm,
I've been able to take stories in pop culture and shift them into educational programs, Dungeons and Dragons, all kinds of different things. And to kind of summarize all of this, I really do think, and I often reflect on being that kid, being
yeah.
afraid and worried and alone, and
Right.
just being like, what is the thing? And for so many people around Colorado, the United States, and even internationally at this point, um, that's been the thing that motivates people. And I always work really hard to remember those bad days as well, because I strongly believe if I just had someone like me who had come alongside me
Yeah.
and listened and understood that my bad day was not me, and actually helped me to communicate in a different capacity,
Yeah.
I had supports, just not supports that always had my mindset that I have now. But if I had that person and that person who could work with me in that way, I think my life would have been very different.
Right.
But I do attribute that all to my love of storytelling and my love of, continuing this work.
No, thank you so much for sharing. What an incredible journey. And, I'm so sorry that you had to experience all that, especially at such a young age. But, question that I did have is that do you feel like having that diagnosis, like, put a label on you and people like judged you before even getting to know you? And the thing is, like, why I asked, because a little bit about myself, I also struggle with mental health and I've had different diagnoses as well. But I feel like, when it comes to medical, they see that on my record and like think everything is related to mental health, even though it's like physical health. So yeah, do you feel like people judged you before getting to know you and didn't even give you that opportunity? And if you did go through that experience, do you feel like overcoming that kind of adversity helped to have more empathy for other people who might be going through that situation?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I think definitely think it's 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 an interesting thing because I've been vocal, very vocal, the vast
Hmm.
majority of my life about my diagnosis.
Right.
But I think the thing that I had to learn was to draw boundaries with how I shared it.
Okay.
Um, but at the same time, I mean, historically, doctors have been biased towards those of us with our own
Right.
neurospiciness and mental
Right.
health stuff, let alone those of us who are not male. I'm going to put it out there in general. There is shocking societal statistics on how male doctors treat male patients versus female patients, let alone those who do not identify as male or female.
Hmm.
I also think there's a lot of judgment. I also grew up in the church, and I have no disdain for the church. I don't like, I definitely had a lot of pain because of that and a lot of judgment, and a lot of people would tell me before I was like 9 years old that
Hmm.
God didn't like something I did before I was
Oh,
born,
oh
and
no.
that's why I had mental health issues,
Oh,
which is wild to tell
yeah.
people if they're an
Wow.
adult, let alone a kid.
Right.
Um, I'm glad that I can walk away from that and kind
Hmm.
of have my own connection to that. But that being said, there's been a lot of judgment. I've had a lot of people
Okay.
who told me they couldn't be friends with me because
Oh.
their parents was afraid. I had a volunteer gig where I was told I couldn't go to an overnight camp with kids because they were worried about my bipolar disorder being a
Oh.
problem. All kinds of stuff. I
Mhm.
think the problem with the mental health journey is very important, and getting diagnosed is a very important part of that. But the unfortunate side of it is a
Right.
label.
Hmm.
It's an identification, and our society is over reliant on labels. And I think though going through that, it has given me substantial
Yeah.
empathy for people other than myself, especially because, no, the mental health community is not a monolith. We don't all
Hmm.
have the same experiences.
Right.
In fact, the vast majority of us who do care are starting to acknowledge the philosophy that treating everyone the same way is not going to work.
Right.
I actually love growing up in the early 90s to 2000s because those were not a great point for
Hmm.
empathy in any
Right.
capacity whatsoever, especially to those of us with lived experience with our own mental health stuff. But getting to see things like that shift in like the 2010s
Hmm.
and getting to see this big push for empathy, and then seeing younger generations like Gen
Yeah.
Z, Gen Alpha, and even I think there's another one. I have terrible name blindness, but the newer generation, like there's such a rallying cry for things like mental health, wellness,
Okay.
and workplaces honoring the experiences of people and better systems of care and all these things, and looking back on that and
Yeah.
what I grew up around and then seeing it now, it gives me this tremendous hope because
Hmm.
there is this big push for empathy. And
Right.
I know a lot of people, when I say this, they're like, oh, but those generations don't know X, Y, and Z about survival. And it's like, who did when they
Hmm.
were like 20 years old or
Yeah.
14? Like, we are not, we are not a society that learns that at a very young age. Um, and I think that despite all the labels, despite all of that, there is this huge push for empathy. And
Yeah.
I think that getting to be a part of that and getting to tell that through storytelling and help people connect to stories,
Yeah.
one, it's very rewarding. But it also, I think one of the great things about stories is it's kind of also helping to undo those labels.
Yeah.
And it's helping people acknowledge there are different forms of communication, there are different pathways. And it's a very scary world. It's a very shocking
Right.
world from time to time, but it's also a very beautiful world we live in. And
Right.
there is so much good being done every day, and I think it's really easy to forget that.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And yeah, I also want to say, you were saying this too, but like I think it's so wonderful how you're sharing your stories, and hopefully people can take a listen, and we can start to dismantle these stereotypes and stigmatizations. So, I'm really grateful and glad for the work that you're doing. But I'd love to go back to your work too. So you built RNH Creative Advocacy and Storytelling from the ground up, and you mentioned on a shoestring budget. So, what kept you going in the early days when resources were limited, but you felt that the need was immense?
I mean, honestly, my love for the work. I'm a
Okay,
very creative person.
I love that.
I I will say the love for the work, but honestly, a lot of it was that was where a lot of my income was coming from a long
Hmm.
time. And there was a need for this to exist.
Right.
I'm not here to say that everything is easy in
Hmm.
this work, or I know that there's, and I'm not here to call anybody out, but I know there's like often a push in public speaking to talk about how you just got to work hard and
Yeah.
you just got to do the work and all these
Hmm.
things. And I think that's great for some people. It
Right.
doesn't work for everybody.
Yes.
And for me, a lot of it was a lot of figuring things out, a lot of hard work, long nights. But I love the people I get to work with. I have a very strong connection with them. And I think the other thing, and pull the veil and be a little vain for a second, part of it is the fact that I have very successful work. Like
Mm.
it's easier to want to invest in work when it's doing well
Right.
versus when it's going bad. And right now it's doing very well, and it's doing very well against a backdrop of a lot of things that are trying to impact that success and a lot of things in the world, a lot of mindsets. But I think that is a testament to the power of this kind of work
Hmm.
and the importance of it. And I think I tell people all the time the methods in which I've established my business and the methods I continue to adapt, I think they're going to become more of an industry norm. And
Uh-huh.
I think especially as there's like less funding for things or families are going to be creating pocket work, I do believe that what I'm establishing can become a framework to, again, not help everybody succeed,
Yeah.
but to help others who have similar passion and similar work. And that also keeps me going.
Right.
More than just the survival or the joy, it's also the value of the work that I'm doing and the beauty of it.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And so you describe your work as creative advocacy. So what does that mean to you? And why do you think that creativity is such a powerful vehicle for justice?
So creative advocacy, in my honest opinion,
Hmm.
I think a lot of people, when they think of advocacy, they have like the very Malcolm X or
Right.
I almost said Charles Xavier. That oh my gosh, now it's out of my head. I know, super famous guy, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr. Um, Not a comic book nerd at all. Yeah.
I love
Um,
that.
um, we think of that. We think like being on
Right.
the steps of the government, doing the work,
Right.
marching, and
Right.
things like that. And I've been a really big advocate that advocacy doesn't need to be those big things. It can
Yeah.
be like going out and doing play with kids and helping them
Hmm.
find their voice through running around and playing games. It can be the rolling of dice through things like
Right.
Dungeons and Dragons. It can help people, set up a poetry night.
I love that.
But really, like creative advocacy is advocacy that is done in creative ways and has a
Yeah.
positive community impact. I always tell people I'm never going to be the guy in front of like tens of thousands of
Hmm.
people, with fireworks going off and all this elaborate stuff that a lot of people view as success in public speaking. And part of that is it doesn't serve my community. The other thing is I don't know how I could be on a stage with like a firework going off. My anxiety would skyrocket.
Right.
I would
Right.
want to run away. And the people who do that, more power to them.
Right.
But like I think the value of this work is we often forget that creativity
Yeah.
is something human beings need. Like we
Right.
crave it in one way or another. And I like to highlight the reality of like when people say, creativity isn't important, I think part of it is
Yeah.
because we forget how many facets creativity can be in life.
Hmm.
A lot of people jump to painting or storytelling, but it can also be working on robotics or figuring out
Yeah.
a math problem or how to use that to help someone. It can be going into the hospitals and finding
Hmm.
out a new method to do a new kind of surgery. Creativity is distinctly human, and I think our societies really like to limit that.
Uh-huh.
But on the same side, like for some reason, we acknowledge that kids need creativity
Yeah.
and the like young infants need creativity, and there's all this value in it. And then we get to a point and we go, okay, you're like 15, you can't
Hmm.
be creative anymore, or you can't have a career in a creative field. And it's really bewildering to me because people, like, especially when people interact with kids, like, the first
Yeah.
thing that kids actually typically ask someone to do is to be creative and
Hmm.
play or have fun. And I think the big, like, one of the bigger resurgences that is happening in this field is the reminder
Yeah.
that creativity is good for us. It's healthy. It helps us learn. It can help us develop problem solving skills, math skills, creative thought processing skills. But it's also just like a means of survival to a
Right.
degree. And I've been this advocate being like, you don't have to be that big person, but I've also
Yeah.
really preached the power of creativity partly because I really think that like the other side is that is when we start telling teenagers they can't be creative and they've got to
Yeah.
get a real job,
Hmm.
there's like a noticeable dimming of their inner light that starts to affect and shift. And I
Yeah.
think especially with the rise of social media, with all the good and the very
Yeah.
bad. It's become a mechanism for people all over the world to embrace what they love and to do it in
Yeah.
ways that we have never done as a world before. And so all of that, I think, is creative advocacy. But also, I think that is all examples of how creativity gets us to share our voice, to
Yeah.
explore our world, to fight for what we think is good and just. And I think it's also sometimes just fighting for what we need in a
Yeah.
moment and to get to the next day and then to the next in order to thrive in life.
No, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that and saying that because I feel like that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast is show that everyday people are moving the needle forward and you don't even have to have a title or even do like this as a career or anything. It's even like just showing up for your neighbor or picking up trash. And, I think because I've studied a lot of social movements in when I was going to school as well in college and learning how like certain people became like the face of the movements, but like how many people weren't named or actually being a part of that movement and moving it forward and I think that's what's beautiful about like movements today. It just like a lot of people are just in these movements and that's what people are saying like, oh, we don't have like our MLKs or Malcolm X's or but it's just like I want people to get away from that mindset too. It's like it's the whole movement wasn't just on like that one or two people. Like it really takes a collective for us to really reach for like, social justice, social change that we really want to see.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's like I look up to Malcolm X and
Hmm.
Martin Luther King Jr. immensely, but I do think that that is like one of the contemporary complaints about
Hmm.
how we look at history because there were
Yeah.
so many people doing
Hmm.
so much work. And there were so many smaller community
Right.
individuals who were doing and carrying those messages and helping to shape those perspectives. And it's interesting that you say moving the needle because I kind of think of it as
Hmm.
like almost like the measuring of an earthquake. We
Oh,
as
okay,
people
right.
kind of
I love that.
expect only really but like you can hear about like I don't know like I don't know the actual numbers on an earthquake chart, but
Mhm.
like you can hear about the 5.0 or like I don't know, a 6.0, which hopefully anybody scientific who actually understands this, please don't get mad at me. I do not live near earthquakes, thankfully, so that's kind of a blessing to not have to know that. But we
Uh-huh.
don't often discuss like the 1.0 or the
Right,
2.0 kind of
right.
things. And my goodness, I am showing my ignorance on this
No,
topic
no.
because I'm using it as an imagery. But we don't talk about the smaller impacts.
Right, right.
And there's actually a movie that of all things, the life of the Curious Case of Benjamin Button,
Oh,
I think
yes.
is the
Uh-huh.
movie. It has one of my favorite lines of any movie because it's like it's as he's looking as he's getting older, and I
Mm-hmm.
think the line, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I'm never going to be able to quote it perfectly, but he says essentially, "It's funny how sometimes the people you least remember have the biggest impact on your life,"
Right,
and
right.
I think that's kind of how a lot of things work. Like we forget about, as a country, we forget about
Mm-hmm.
some of the people who do a lot of the big work because the bigger names get indoctrinated into these movements.
Right.
But there are so many people doing so much good
Yeah.
work, literally every day. And
Yeah.
I don't think it's a fame thing. I don't think it's um, a judgment or a lack
Mm-hmm.
of consciousness. I think it's just how we as people glom onto information,
Okay.
and how we kind of hold the perspective of times that are really not that far gone by.
Right. No, I think about that a lot too. And thank you for sharing. And I'd love to learn more from you as well. So, sensory-friendly events are still not widely understood or prioritized. Even myself, I'm not as familiar with it. So, why is sensory access a justice issue? And what do you think that people often get wrong about this?
So I mean, I'm gonna start with the second question and move back. So I
Okay.
think the big thing people forget is it's not a sensitivity. A
Mm,
lot of people, and I have multiple family members. I love them dearly, but they often use the phrasing of, "Oh, you're so sensitive," or "You're such a
right.
sensitive person."
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that I always have to look at it from their perspective because for me, it's like, well, it's not me being sensitive; it's me communicating something that's really bugging me.
Right.
And I think a lot of people automatically assume that being in a different kind of sensitive to like loud concert halls or being around a couple
Mm-hmm.
thousand people, that is to a degree a sensitivity, but a medical sensitivity.
Mm,
Whereas
yeah.
for people, it's also a survival mechanism to not be around thousands of people, which I think it's so weird that we've gotten to a point in our society when we look at much of human history and how separated we all are to being like at a big like Taylor Swift concert or something and there
Mm,
being 10,000 people
right.
and then loud music. And I love Taylor Swift's music actually.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an anti Taylor Swift person at all.
Me too.
Um but like yeah, there's like 10,000 people, extremely loud music,
Mm-hmm.
overpriced food.
Right.
Some people are drinking way too much. Some are drinking a little bit more than they should. Some people are stressed out. And then you like factor in being in a new place,
Mm,
potentially having to take a taxi with someone you don't know,
right.
or a lift or whatever. Then you have late at night. Then you
Mm-hmm.
have all that sensory overwhelm of like ears ringing, being burnt out,
Right.
and then like having to navigate your way home
Mm-hmm.
without even factoring in like if you've been drinking or doing something else, right? Like those are all things that can be deeply overwhelming to a person. And
Yeah.
to be fair, being in a small room with six people you don't know can be deeply overwhelming. And that's where the
Right.
heart of this work really comes from because it's all about establishing a space that is kind, compassionate.
Mm-hmm.
People know who they can go to if they need to seek support. More and more places are implementing dark corners of a room or like a side room where people can go and decompress,
Right.
especially at like conventions and things. All of those are steps of a sensory friendly space, but it's also things like lighting and
Mm.
telling stories, not so necessarily on a microphone, but in a small space where everybody can hear us.
Uh-huh.
And the importance of this work really is allowing us as people to access our communities, one, without the
Okay.
bias or judgment that people are going to automatically going to be able to access somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like I go to a local mega box store and the lighting gives me migraines and there's people stressed out and they're trying to get stuff. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of noise, and then the lines are typically like 12 people long. And
Right.
by the time I'm there, I'm like, I have a horrible vestibular migraine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm stressed out. We spent a ton of money. And like, I love the place. Some of you might
Mm-hmm.
be able to figure out which place this is based on what I'm hinting at.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, no shame. But those are really intense situations. And a lot of people, like you said, don't necessarily value that aspect yet. There are more and more organizations acknowledging that this is not just a societal or a social component, it's a survival component.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also acknowledging that there is a right as human beings to access a space in which is truly accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I My big frustration with this and the community viewpoint on it is it's not often talked about within like the disability right advocates
Okay.
or like the laws and things because it's seen as a sensitivity and
Mm-hmm.
not, once again, not that survival aspect. And I hope someday it will be. I'd like to be
Right.
able to help make that a thing. But I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it is. Thank you. And you also work closely with youth through writing programs, Dungeons and Dragons, and creative mentorship. So, yeah, I'd love to hear what have young people taught you about voice, courage, and leadership. I feel like we have so much to learn from young people.
Oh my gosh, yes. So I think the big thing, I mean, one of the big things that I'll say is a little bit smaller is just how much our world is changing,
Mm-hmm.
um, but also how much that is not a bad thing.
Uh-huh.
I've been an advocate for a long time that society is meant to change and it's
Mm-hmm.
not supposed to get stagnant. And like I get a lot of pushback from that from a lot of people I know. But I find one of the easiest ways to get left behind in this world is to not adapt to change and to not
Okay.
adapt
Right.
to like current perspectives. And whether we like it or not, these younger generations, like the younger end of millennial and older end of millennial, like I'm
Mm-hmm.
on the very edge of the older end of millennial.
Mm-hmm.
And like Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they're going to be running things very soon
Yeah.
here.
Right.
And on whether you like it or not, and that's to anybody who's listening, there's going to be a lot of change in a
Right.
lot of different ways, and there's going to be a lot of very strong wills pushing against things that are honestly not great and have kind of just
Mm.
been allowed because it is status quo.
Right.
Um, the other thing that I learned is, a big one is honestly to check myself more and
Mm.
acknowledge that I do have my biases. I actually listened to a beautiful talk by
Okay.
a woman from the BIPOC community, and she was talking on bias. And I
Mm.
promise I'll purchase this gentleness because she was as well. But she essentially said, everyone is biased. Every
Yeah.
single human
Right.
being is biased
Mm-hmm.
in many, many different ways.
Yeah.
However, we need to carry that bias with empathy, compassion, and direction. And
Mm-hmm.
the last thing she said on this was just because we are biased doesn't mean we have to let that bias guide
Mm.
us
Right.
and control us.
Yeah.
And I love that so much. I so wish that I knew who this woman was. I heard it in a webinar ages ago.
Mm,
This was, in my opinion, one of the best, like, empathetic approaches
yeah.
to a conversation on bias I've ever heard in my life. And I think that is one, it's non-judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
Two, it unifies more than it separates. And
Yeah.
I'm seeing that more and more in these younger generations. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of anger, there's a lot of frustration, but there's also like an understanding that people deserve to thrive,
Yeah.
whether
I
or
love
not
that.
they like always agree. And I
Mm-hmm.
know like social media loves to blow it up the other way, but I feel like
Right.
part of that is because social media is always very good at advocate inadvertently
Yeah.
projecting very strong yelly mindsets
Mm-hmm.
versus like very calm rational ones, which is why I always tell people, and
Mm-hmm.
I've actually gotten this feedback from many youth as well, which is set your filters a certain way and don't
Uh-huh.
feel bad
Yeah.
about blocking a creator. Um, and
Yeah.
I've actually had someone say that.
Yeah.
I in the class I got checked on my opinions about Hollywood, and it was a beautiful. Like I basically
Yeah.
ranted for a little bit on why I think based on stories in Hollywood are big lies, and I
Mm-hmm.
got this beautiful check of like, well,
Wow.
technically it's based on. It's
Uh-huh.
not, they're not advertising it as
Yeah.
a full, like fully accurate story. And
Mm-hmm.
she was like, well, might as well, you might as well understand based on is different. And they're obviously going to cut things out because it's a movie and not a,
Yeah.
documentary or whatever. And I was like, kudos to you for thinking on that level and
Yeah.
having that level of like bravery to check me on that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, to summarize all this, the big thing really is just these generations, they've got a good handle on a lot. And if we
Yeah.
teach them and guide them in very compassionate ways, despite our bias,
Yeah.
we're going to have a very strong, capable, and maybe a little rocky, but
Uh-huh.
very, very powerful series of generations rising up
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And I definitely agree. I have a lot of hope for this upcoming
Mhm.
generation of leadership. So, I want to talk about this too. So, you built bridges between over 50 businesses and their communities. So, what does meaningful partnership look like when it's done with integrity rather than just optics?
So I mean, I think the big thing is community driven work, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to also be transparent. I think it's going to be very different depending on the business to the business.
Uh-huh.
Um, it the unfortunate thing is businesses need to make money in one
Uh-huh.
way or another. Like as much as we don't want to look at it from that
Right.
perspective, they do.
Yeah.
And like I know it's like very easy to get mad at businesses nowadays, especially ones that do really well and make unpopular decisions. But as somebody pointed out to me one day, like you can be mad at them, but at the end of the day, the
Mm-hmm.
CEO might make a decision, and then there's like 13 million
Mm-hmm.
employees who may disagree but have no choice in whether or not they want to execute it.
Right.
And I think that's been a really good mentality to have
Mm-hmm.
because for me, so often I have a hard time asking for money, and
Uh-huh.
sometimes it has been let's make a profitable program
Mm-hmm.
that also helps people. Sometimes it's in the work that I've done, it's been let's do a free program and run it, and we might take a loss, and that'll be good, but the end goal will be good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think when it comes down to what is a good community connection, I would always advise people first. Put people
Okay.
before the dollar, but also make sure it's sustainable. Like,
Yeah.
we don't talk a lot about the importance of sustainability,
Mm-hmm.
especially in a public mindset. And if you love a business and you want them to do well and you want their programs to run, their community programs to run, they
Mm-hmm.
have to be sustainable. And I think it's really important that those programs be sustainable,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they're, doing good work. And the last thing I think I'd like to say, and I know we talk a lot about cringe and
Mm-hmm.
or like virtue signaling, but I think we kind of lost the thread on that a little bit as a society, where
Right.
just about anything that is someone trying to be genuine or trying to share the value of their work from time to time can be seen as cringe or virtue signaling.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that being collectively as a society, we kind of are billions of different people with
Yeah.
different perspectives, and sometimes we like to vent and complain
Right.
about people. But I think being genuine is key, even if it's a little cringe or it's virtue signals a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think virtue signaling is inherently bad unless you're utilizing it to like profit off of
Mm.
people in like a very kind of malicious way. And
Right.
I think in that it's probably not virtue signaling so much as sharing openly and honestly when we think about the people in our community,
Yeah.
and the programs we want to run. And so, I mean, I think those are key, sustainability, the people, all of those things. But I think it's also the end product of a program. I know
Yeah.
product is not a very favorable word in a lot of people's mindset, but when you have a business and you are running a program, that is a product.
Mm.
And when that program is done, that is producing a community service.
Yeah.
And while those terms are not favorable, and there's definitely better ways to say it, and there's definitely more ways to be like, you can call it a community program, you can call it all these
Mm-hmm.
things. At the end, well, when you're doing your taxes, it's a product and it's a program and it's a production of a service.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to just know how to share that and that honesty with a direct but also deeply mindful
Mm.
direction.
Yeah.
Because a good program or a good community camp is run with compassion, empathy, purpose-driven mindset, and sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a bad one is the end goal is those dollar bills, which is I
Yeah.
don't know why I said it that way, but I did. But yeah.
Yeah. No, no, thank you for sharing that. And something that I want to do with this podcast too is give my listeners tangible takeaways, like how they can actually take steps to be in solidarity with these different communities that I've been having on this podcast. So with that, what's one small but powerful action listeners can take to make their spaces, so this can be whether their workplaces, schools, or communities, more sensory aware and inclusive?
I mean, the big thing
Mm-hmm.
for these spaces, and sometimes the easiest,
Yeah.
especially depending on your connection to your community, is
Mm-hmm.
bringing in community voices.
Okay.
It I mean, I'll be a little blunt here. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot have a truly inclusive space if you are not bringing in voices from your community to help
Right.
you make that an inclusive space.
Right.
And that's something, unfortunately, we as human beings have found out many
Mm-hmm.
times and yet continue to do,
Yeah.
in a lot of different work. And I don't just mean posting on social media
Mm-hmm.
or sending an email. I mean, like, genuinely bringing in voices, creating a safe
Yeah.
space, taking in feedback with compassion, understanding,
Mm-hmm.
sincerity, honoring the privacy of those voices, so not
Yeah.
necessarily blasting them on social media. If you can afford it, paying people for their community insights and their
Mm-hmm.
community development, which unfortunately that's a lot harder than it should be to be able to do out there.
Yeah.
Um, but it really starts with the people in your community. And I will say to the other aspect of that, there is there is a lot of harm that has been done by having
Yeah.
people behind closed doors
Mm-hmm.
make decisions for
Right.
people with lived experience with a wide variety of things, especially when there are no voices from
Yeah.
those communities. Um, and it will show up as tone deaf and it
Mhm.
will show up as contrary to your point, and it will make people mad, and it
Right.
should.
Right.
Um, and so I think it's really important to note the other aspect of this is the execution and
Mm.
actually following through on what people want.
Yeah.
And a sad reality is sometimes it's not possible in the immediate, but it can be possible in the future.
Right.
And I think a good way to demonstrate that is to keep communication going,
Mhm.
keeping it consistent, and also adapting when certain pathways don't succeed, and
Yeah.
refocusing and apologizing. And I
Yeah.
could go into a lot more, but ask your community,
Yeah.
execute the programs that they want wonderfully.
Uh-huh.
And I say wonderfully because when it comes to accessibility, there is no real room
Mhm.
for mediocrity.
Mhm.
And the other thing is when you start executing those programs, like make them for the community, make them work, honor the
Mhm.
lighting, honor the sensory needs, and don't rebound against your
Yeah.
community when you need to make changes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you too. And I feel like I think about this a lot too. But something that I want to add on that too, because inclusion is really important to me too. But I think we need to take it a step further than just having people in the room. But, I think we need to get folks also into leadership positions,
Hmm.
like positions of leadership, and get them in positions of power. So that's something that I really want to do in my own work. That's what I try to do too, is like not just having that space where we can listen to them, but have them be the people who are making the decisions and having these positions of power, which I hope that we could get to that point. Like I was with this amazing AmeriCorps program called Public Allies, and what we try to do is like show how we want people from the community to serve our communities, where they can also hopefully lead our communities as well. So it's just like yeah, that's something that's also important to me that I thought about as you were talking about that.
Yeah, and one last thing I will add to that.
Uh-huh.
And I think because I agree, and that was actually part of my mindset with the conversation about having them in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also want to say this, and I know many people will understand this, but for the people who won't,
Uh-huh.
um, please, 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 in particular, like I'm a very pale white male man. And I say this as someone who has had his own experiences with some bad decisions in this, and I've
Okay.
seen even worse in other organizations. If you are running a program for women in need, please have women on staff in that
Right.
room. If you
Mm-hmm.
are looking to have a program for the BIPOC community, please have it
Mm-hmm.
be run by the BIPOC community.
Right.
If you're looking for the hard of hearing programs or whatever, we like you said this to have in leadership, but we also need to have it in staff. We need to have those
Right.
people in every step of the program. And
Yeah.
even then, it's not going to serve everybody. But
Mm-hmm.
for people like me to
Mm-hmm.
jump in and go, oh, I'll immediately understand how to run a program from someone
Right.
who is not like me, it's just not going to work. There's not going to be
Yeah.
perspective. And it is such a sign of trust, not just to take in those voices and to have leaderships, but
Mm-hmm.
if I was running a program for the BIPOC community and every single one of the staff
Yeah.
looked just like me,
Right.
there's a certain tonal detachment to
Right.
that. I'm not saying that you can't
Yeah.
have Caucasian white men at
No,
an event,
totally. But the
but
community will realize that too. They're going to notice
mhm,
that. Yeah. Especially if you're coming into the community to serve them. Yeah, because
yeah,
they're gonna see like, oh, there's not people who look like me. So yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I think that is really helpful for connection.
absolutely. And I don't mean that as anybody, mean to anybody like me or looks like me or anything, but
Yeah,
it's a sign of respect and
right.
admiration and camaraderie to have people from the communities you're trying to serve be there. It
Yeah.
also is a very strong, equitable
Hmm.
and sustainable business practice to increase the inclusivity in other ways.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And, thank you so much for your time today. I had such a wonderful time talking with you. But just as we're wrapping up, I'd love to just wrap up on the note of hope. So, with that, what gives you hope right now, even in the midst of so much uncertainty and division?
So, I mean, the easiest thing, in all
Uh-huh.
honesty, I get to work with a lot of people throughout a lot of different communities,
Okay.
and I mean, the biggest thing that gives me hope is just seeing how happy people are to
Hmm.
access their community, to share their voice, see what happens when you roll dice and get to be silly for a
Uh-huh.
little while. Um, I keep saying this, but there is so much being good being done, and I know
Right.
it's not necessarily profitable all the time for the
Hmm.
news to talk about it. I
Yeah.
know there's a lot of things around the world that can drown out that goodness,
Right.
but if you are lucky enough to
Hmm.
see that good, and you are
Yeah.
lucky enough to see it on a regular basis, I urge you to genuinely practice gratitude for that, because there is
Yeah.
nothing that gives hope for the future like seeing goodness,
Hmm.
seeing a thriving community, seeing the passion of people around you, and then being able to step back and sit in that and embrace that and use that almost as an antidote for some of
Uh-huh.
the things going on in the world. And if you can't find that, I do
Yeah.
encourage you to go out and try to find your community. It's hard. It's so
Right.
hard for so many people, even like many men that look a lot like I do, because I
Hmm.
realize I look like about 80% of the men on the internet. Um, at least the ones with, I won't get into it, but I look like so many dudes on the internet that there are now emojis on Zoom that
Oh,
look like
really?
me. Yeah,
That's so
no, my
funny.
students have pointed that out.
I gotta check
Um,
that out. I would have never known.
but the other
Yeah.
last thing I will say is also take time to laugh.
Yeah, I
And
agree. I
sit
agree.
in laughter. It's such a wonderful thing to just listen to something stupid or listen
Uh-huh.
to something informative and laugh. And
Mhm.
it's laughter is not going to cure you from cancer, but it can heal your heart a little bit
Yeah.
and it can get you through a really hard day.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you so much. I love that we're ending on that note. But just lastly, how can people find you if they'd like to connect with you?
Yeah, so I'll make sure that my LinkedIn and my link tree are provided as well as my email.
Perfect. Hmm.
I always say my email out loud just to explain why I realize I was gifted it, and now to this day I never realize how hard it is for people until people hear it. But my email
Okay.
is ndttrpg@gmail. And when I
Okay.
took on that email, I had no idea that that was going to sound exactly like that until I started saying it out loud on podcast interviews. So I'll also make sure that's provided because I realize probably the vast majority of people are going to be heavily confused by that. But I'll
Okay.
also make sure my website is going. And genuinely, for those listening, I love questions. I love to have
Yeah.
conversations with people. I love to answer those questions. Might take me a little bit because I'm absurdly busy.
Hmm.
Um, but if you want to ask those questions or see me at an event, you absolutely can, because I do enjoy human connection.
Yeah, no, and I could definitely tell, just in our short time talking today. But, thank you again. You're doing such wonderful work. I wish you all the best as you're still building, moving forward. And, thank you again for your time. I hope that, yeah, we can stay connected. And I hope that you have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Take care. Talk to you again.
Talk to you, Ben.
Bye. Thank you for being here and tuning in to Voices That Propel Us, stories of justice, action, and community. Your presence in this movement matters. If today's conversation moved you, share it, talk about it, and keep the work going. Together, we're not just imagining change, we're making it. Until next time, stay bold, stay grounded, and stay in the fight.
Every time I feel so mad and sad and bad, I say to myself, relax, lean back, it's a brand new day, and time I feel so down that a frown is all that's on my face, I remind myself to take a breath. It's a brand new day.